raise animals, chickens.
Well, the only animals they raised was my brother and I. But in those days, my father was so busy, working 7 days a week in business. And he started when I used to do his books, okay, his books for keeping his income. And I remember he used to circle the amount of money he made that week. And remember, he was making the circle was $16 within a circle. But because he was working 7 days a week in his own business, never turn a customer away. They come at 9 o'clock at night wanting their radio repaired. He really never had time to grow a garden. But what it was is during World War II, we had what they call victory gardens. So everyone had a garden. And I hated it because I was the one that did the weeding. Okay, in those days, we also had hand mowers, not like we know today. Push it with a engine on it, but they were hand mowers and they were powered by manpower, and they were very difficult to use if the grass got a little high.
Yeah, I actually remember. I've used those here and there, but no, I remember them. I've seen them. Now, did you have a favorite meal as a child? Was there any kind of special meal that was a favorite of yours?
Lobster tail, but I never saw it. What was my favorite meal? My mother used to make chopped liver. It sounds awful, but you can get it today. I still love it. And I used to like what they call blintzes.
Blintzes, oh yeah.
Like ravioli, but with usually cheese or fruit in them. And because we didn't get it that often.
They were sweet.
They were sweet. Yeah, and you ate them with schmetna, which means sour cream in Yiddish.
Yeah, that sounds Slavic.
Yep.
Now, you had mentioned before about your what role religion played. You had mentioned that before. But did your family go on vacations? And where did they go if they went?
Now, this is in English town once again, before I went to South Brunswick when I got married. In those days, there was no such thing as vacation. Nobody went to Florida. Nobody went to Canada. Only the wealthy. Okay, and what it was, my dad finally, years later, went on a week's vacation to Florida. No planes, but very few. Had to drive. Okay, and it was usually, in those days, 30 to 35-hour drive because the cars could not go 60 and 70 miles an hour. There was no turnpikes, there was no interstates.
Yeah.
And when he came back, he said, you know something? This is great. I fill up when I think about it. I should have been doing this for years. We didn't have the money, and if time was money, being self-employed, there was no such thing as sick leave, vacations, overtime. And in those days, when I went to work summers, I got paid $1 an hour. I was working summer jobs, and then when I got out of school, I was working full-time because I had come out of college and not had gone to graduate school yet. So I had numerous jobs in factories. The best job I had in my life, including what I did after I got my degrees, was the local town postman. That was great. You went house to house, and you knew all the people. When
you were a mailman.
I was a mailman for 2 years.
Okay.
But when we got to the tavern, Stroby's, I was underage, I wasn't 21 yet, they'd have a shot of scotch set up for me in the wintertime.
To keep warm.
Yeah, and there were no exercise clubs in those days. Your exercise was work. W-O-R-K.
Now, you would come here from Englishtown, and you said you went to Jamesburg High School.
Yeah, correct.
But talk about when you did come over to South Brunswick and in this area here. Tell us how the roads were different, what Route 1 looked like, and George's Road, some of the roads right in this area.
I was considered a newcomer
Mm-hmm.
because most of the folks had been here all their life. And 27 Highway, they used to call the Old Lincoln Highway.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and what it was there were very few, you could cross, believe it or not, Randy, you could cross Highway 27 without looking. Without looking. It was amazing. There were very few cars, even at rush hour. Okay, because a lot of people in those days worked in their immediate area. Okay, and even before that, and a lot of people didn't have cars, and women were not working. Okay, they were tied to the cook stove, so that you didn't have many cars, and you didn't have a lot of people commuting. Okay, if they did commute, it was usually by train. Bus service in South Brunswick has been nothing, and that's one of the shortcomings. Highway 1 was 2 lanes, one each way, and it had no concrete divider. It had a grass lane, okay, with little side concrete, very low, maybe 3 feet high, but there was grass in between, and it really looked nice. But it was a headache for the State Department of Transportation. It was called the Highway Department then, and it was a headache because they always had to mow it. And if they did mow it sometimes, it got pretty high and you couldn't see across to the other lanes.
Okay, so
There were no jug handles, and most of the highway didn't have lights.
So if there were no jug handles, how did you turn around if you went too far? I mean, how would you just have to get off into town and then turn around, take another road?
Now what you had to do is like we do here. What you would do is you would pull down. If you wanted to go east, you would pull down and start going west. A lot of people do that to get away from the line of traffic, and then you turn around in somebody's driveway, okay, and then head across the highway going east toward Mama Junction.
You could do that on Route 1 back in the day. I mean, it's hard to believe you were able to do anything like that now because of the volume and the speed and everything.
Yeah, well, usually there would, at Route 1 at the major intersections, okay, there would be lights, but they were few and far between.
Now,
but you could cross one in most places with very little traffic.
So the shopping areas and groceries and clothes and things like that, where was the place or the town you went to get those things done?
In South Brunswick?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. They had no supermarkets. The first one was in the old Kendall Park, as we called it, and that was around 1960. Kendall Park opened in 55. Okay, and there was, I believe, was a food town. But before that, as the locals used to say, we went to New Brunswick.
New
They
Brunswick?
didn't say New Brunswick. And my first supermarket I was ever in was called the King Market. Okay, no, I'm sorry, the King Bear Market. Okay, and it was in New Brunswick. It was the first time I ever pushed a shopping cart, because in the mom and pop stores there were no shopping carts. You just around and bundle or put up stuff on the counter. We also had to go there for pizza, and also for Chinese food.
So that was the closest place for anything like that. I guess that was considered ethnic food back then, something like pizza even.
And we considered New Brunswick the city.
Not the city, but the city back then.
The city back then. And it was an altogether different culture there. Altogether different. New Brunswick was very safe at night. We'd go Thursday nights, that was shopping night in New Brunswick. Okay, but the stores were always closed on Sunday.
Okay.
And it was not a blue law. It was just a custom, and it was always, you couldn't shop on a Sunday.
It's just the way they did things. It wasn't a law. It was just a custom.
It wasn't a blue law.
Right.
No, it was just a tradition.
So New Brunswick was a place that you went to, but Trenton is a little bit further, so you wouldn't end up going there for anything like that.
No, Trenton, we would rarely go to, as you say, because of distance.
It's too far.
Yeah, New Brunswick was a lot closer.
And New York and Philadelphia, I mean, they're even farther, so...
Yeah, I went to New York frequently because we had relatives.
Mm-hmm.
My grandmother was in New York. And then I had a very prominent uncle, my father's brother, that was a U.S. attorney for the Southern District of Manhattan. He put away, let me see, one of the famous, Legs Diamond. Okay, and then he was the manager, the campaign manager for Thomas Dewey when he ran and when Dewey lost.
Oh, right.
And he lost his own state, where my uncle was the campaign manager. But we would go to visit him, and we'd go to visit my grandmother, who lived in the Bronx. and she lived in one of the few apartment houses in those days that wasn't a walk-up, it had an elevator. Okay, and she was Russian background.
So that was unusual, you're saying, to have an elevator.
Yeah, unusual.
Now, did your family have a car?
Getting back, can I get back to
Sure.
to New York?
Mm-hmm.
We'd go in on a Sunday. That was the place that were open Sunday, the East Side, Houston, Delancey, Orchard, and that was open Sundays because the Jews celebrate the Sabbath on a Saturday. So the places on there were push carts all the way along Orchard Street, and you'd go there, and that's why you'd buy clothing, groceries. There was a pickle man, Red the Pickle Man, in the East Side. He had a big pickle barrels, and he'd reach in, and you'd buy the pickles by the pound. And I remember that as a kid.
Pickle barrels. I've seen them. But distant memory.
He always claimed he was so poor, and when he closed up his push cart, he'd get into a late model Cadillac. Red the Pickle Man.
The Pickle Man from the East Side.
Yep.
Now, and the car. Did your family have a car? Or?
Only because my dad
It was
used
business.
to go out to 25, 30 miles, as far as, I would say, as far as maybe Clarksburg in those days, and all to repair radios.
Oh, Clarksburg. So Clarksburg, meaning that's Lawrence, right?
Near Lawrence. That's,
Yeah, about where the Quaker Bridge Mall close to.
Well, that's actually Millstone Township. Okay, not Millstone Borough. It's off Highway 33. But we would go all over in order to make a buck. Okay, and he would often go to the farms and either pick the radios up, or they'd sometimes bring them in.
And these are all tube radios, not
These
transistor.
were all vacuum tube radios, right?
They had to warm up and everything.
With about 5 stations, and they had to warm up. That's right.
Now, tell me about your first car and what it was and what year it was.
You know, it's funny. I remember I always bought used cars until 1999. I got a few bucks, and the first new car was $2,600 in 1999, if I remember, a little earlier. My first car was it makes me sad when I think of it. I'm attached to it. A 1950 Plymouth Deluxe,
Okay.
a 4-door, and I bought it used, and it was in good shape for $400.
Wow, and the doors probably closed like refrigerator doors,
Like
right?
refrigerator.
I remember those.
Yeah, no power steering, and the steering wheel, when you turned, you had to be a giant or a wrestler to manage a steering wheel. There were only 1-cylinder brakes. I lost my brakes 3 times. It was only one master cylinder. There was no radio in it. Surely not air conditioning. They had what they call your air conditioning was 4 on the door, and what it was, you had to crank your windows open. There was also a vent in the middle of the cowl in front of the windshield, and you had to push this lever, and it opened this vent to bring fresh air in.
Okay.
But that was air conditioning in those days. It was primitive,
Yeah. I wonder what the.
and that was fancy compared to what my parents came up with.
But I mean, you these cars had heat in them, no air conditioning, no radio.
Used cars, or new cars also, did not always have heat. Earlier, and my dad was involved in that, they had to put in heaters, and the heaters that we put in, he installed, were gasoline heaters.
Really?
Very dangerous. They were made by Stuart Warner. They were called Southwind, and they went against the firewall, normally where your radio now is, but underneath there against the firewall, and it had a little pilot in it to light it like a hot water heater would be. And there was one advantage of it, though. As soon as you turned it on, okay, you had instant heat.
And it was powered by gasoline?
It was powered by gasoline off the gasoline from your car.
Wow.
Okay, very dangerous.
It does even sounds dangerous.
Well, that one great advantage was... Can you stop it?
Yeah.
Okay.